I spent 17 years addicted to heroin from the age of 23 to 40, in and out of jails, detoxes, hospitals, countless life-threatening infections, overdoses, hospital stays, probations, paroles, catching a new felony every week, peeing in cups, homelessness. And you would think that that would be the hardest thing I'd ever have to go through. That's what I thought, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I lost both of my parents within a 3-month period of time at the tail end of that heroin addiction. And that grief broke me in ways that my addiction never did. Because people think that once you've survived addiction, that you can survive anything. But grief, man, grief is a whole other beast. And today I'm going to talk about it. I was a 23-year-old college graduate with a master's degree and a licensed clinical social worker when I first became a junkie. My addiction escalated so quickly that within a year and a half, I was homeless, I was broke, went through all of my money. I started breaking the law, becoming a criminal, catching felonies, going to detoxes, and my life stayed like that for 17 straight years. Constantly sick, constantly hating my life, constantly miserable, wondering why life had to be so hard for me all the time. It became this constant loop, this vicious cycle of everything's going wrong and I'm so incredibly miserable and I hate my life, so I'm going to use to escape from it. Whereas using began as something that made me feel amazing and quieted my head and gave me this sick, twisted sense of control and purpose in my life, and soon escalated into me using as a solution to everything, to life, because things started going wrong so very quickly. Getting high became my solution to all of it. But grief, there's no escape from the grief. There's no escaping those feelings. You have to get through it. I was 40 years old. My dad had just died in September 2019. 2 months after that, in November 2019, November 9th, was the last day I used. And then less than a month after that, in the beginning of December 2019, my mom died. I was freshly off of heroin, and I was in a place where I couldn't access it after my mom died. Because I firmly believe that if I had access to the drugs and the things that I really wanted to be doing to escape those feelings of loss, I would have died. I would have died. Because all I wanted to do was escape those feelings of loss and the grief and the severe spiraling. There was no pill, there was no drug, there was no drink, there was no substance that could take those feelings away. Grief is incredibly raw. It's real. I had to sit in it. I had to wake up in it. There was no escaping it. Addiction felt like a war with myself. It was a war within myself. Grief for me, I lost the two people I loved the most, the only two people I had in the entire world. My dad was my only support system throughout my addiction. Literally, he was always there, always answered the phone, would pick me up from jail, would come to my court dates, drive me to detox. He was there for me emotionally, even though the addiction wasn't really talked about, he was always there. I knew I could rely on him. He was my rock. I depended on my dad. My grief, I had lost the two most important, the only people I had in the entire world, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. I kept wanting to turn back time somehow. And the fact that neither of them got to see me in recovery, the only version of me that they saw for literally the last 20 years of their lives, was the junkie, liar, manipulative version of me. And I have to live with that, which made the grief a million times worse. And the finality of the fact that there was absolutely nothing I could do about any of it was so much harder than the vicious cycle I looped around during my entire 20 years of active addiction. Because throughout my addiction, there was always still that tiny piece of hope in the back of my brain that I could eventually do better at some point in my life and that I could eventually turn it all around at some point. I hoped that I could. But the grief, there is absolutely nothing that I could do about it. There was no hope, zero hope. The finality of grief and losing people that you love the most. Literally, the way it all happened was straight out of a Jerry Springer episode. My dad had had a severe heart attack 3 months or 2.5 months before he actually died. And I had been in Mexico. A friend of mine bought me a ticket to fly back as soon as I found out that he was in the hospital in the ICU from a severe heart attack. The hospital called me. I was his next of kin on his medical paperwork. And my brother, who I hadn't talked to in more than 15 years because I stole a crap ton of money from him when I was like 26, very early within the first 2 years of my addiction. And he pressed charges against me. And it kind of put a wrench in the family where I stopped being invited home for holidays. But I still continued to talk to my dad literally every day. But it was so much so that I didn't know at all that my brother was harboring hatred towards me. I didn't know that he was holding on to that resentment from all those many years prior. So the first time I saw my brother, I remember I got off the plane in Boston and a friend of mine picked me up. It was like 3 in the morning. And of course, the first thing I did was get high. I mean, listen, I made a crap ton of mistakes in my life, in my addiction, and I could have done a lot of things differently and better. I could have been a better human being, but I wasn't calling the shots. My body, my addiction, my brain had me believing that I couldn't survive without heroin. So I did whatever I had to do to get it and to not get sick. So I got off the plane in Boston and I got high first thing when I got in the car and we drove directly to the hospital. It was like 3 in the morning and it was a 2 hour drive. So we get to the hospital, it's like 4 or 5 in the morning. And I go straight to the ICU to see my dad. And he was like knocked out. I talked to the nurses. It's like I was so severely broken as a person, but my dad, I mean, he didn't even know I was coming. The next day, I woke up and went back to the hospital, and that's when I ran into my brother for the first time in over 15 years. And he was standing right outside the elevator, like right outside the waiting room. And he looked at me and he looked me up and down and he said, "What are you doing here?" And my response was, "I'm here to see my father." And right off the rip, it was a battle zone. I was smacked across the face with his hatred. I was completely blindsided by the hatred that he had bottled up and he had been carrying with him for all those years. I had absolutely no idea. Now, here's the thing, because my dad and my parents never talked to me about my brother. Like, I didn't know what he was up to, I didn't know where he was living, I didn't really know much of anything about his life. So, in turn, I didn't know how much he knew about my life. I didn't know if he knew I was busy being a junkie for so long. I knew he was aware that I was getting arrested all the time. He was actually in court one day with my dad because my dad didn't want to drive and they had a hard time finding the courthouse and all the things. And I talk about a humbling experience, but they were both there. So I knew that he had knowledge of like what I'd been up to. But again, nothing was really talked about in my family. So I honestly didn't know if he knew that I was literally talking to my dad on a daily basis. I didn't know if he knew what our relationship was like because it was clear to me that he thought I was just using my dad for money and that I was just there for money and that all I cared about was getting money. And I guess from the outside, if you didn't know me, if you didn't know the actual relationship between my father and me, it would seem that way, I guess, because if you knew I was a junkie and you knew my dad had been enabling me and giving me money and paying for the roof over my head, then you would just kind of assume that I was using my dad. But honestly, that's not. He was my rock. He was my only support. When shit got hard, I'd call my dad. And even though we never talk about it, but like I crashed my car. So I went through 4 cars in 15 years, totaled all of them. And I've been in dozens of car accidents. Every time I'd call my dad, "It's okay, Ange, as long as you're okay." So I didn't know if my brother knew about that relationship fully. during those couple of months when my dad was in the hospital, he never got to be discharged. He stayed in the hospital and he slowly deteriorated. But over those 2 months, I continued to get high. And I did things that I never ever thought that I would do because my dad was dying in the hospital and wasn't cognizant or really lucid. So I took what I wanted to take and I stole from my dad while he was dying in the hospital, which is something I literally never thought that I would do. And it took me a long time to even verbalize that, to even say it out loud, because I was so ashamed of myself. And I got arrested for doing it. He had me arrested. So knowing that he died and that was the last experience he had with me before he died breaks my heart in so many ways. It is indescribable. My brother would go on to ban me from visiting my father in the hospital. So the last month or so that he was in the hospital before he died, I couldn't even visit. I couldn't even talk to the staff. I wasn't allowed to get updates. I didn't even find out that he died for 2 days. I was left out of the obituary. I wasn't even told of the funeral services. I was lucky enough that I even got to stand up next to the casket at the wake. And my brother also went ahead and took it upon himself to block me from my own mother's telephone. So I had been sending my mom messages the couple months I was there. I didn't know that she had been sick too. She was in the hospital. She had been diagnosed years and years prior with COPD. So she had a lot of health issues. I had pretty much stopped talking to her throughout my addiction because I just couldn't face her. I couldn't lie to her face anymore. I couldn't lie to her. I had been so incredibly close with my mom, and I chose my addiction over our relationship. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So when I found out where she was, I had to track her down. I found out where she was. She was in a live-in hospital, and I went in to visit her. And about a week later, 2 weeks later, she passed away. And I had no idea that she was even that far gone. It wasn't just the loss of my parents, it was the circumstances surrounding it. I was consistently in this dissociative state. I recall it like it was yesterday. Like I repeatedly would say to myself over and over, like, I can't believe this is my life. Like, this is my life. Is this really happening? It didn't feel real. It was so surreal in the most negative way possible. I could not grasp the reality of the situation. I just couldn't. And I was getting high throughout all of it. So when I finally came back to Mexico, because all my stuff was here, and luckily a friend of mine bought me a ticket back because I didn't have the money. I lost my father, and who I depended on him for everything. So when I lost him, I literally lost everything. And I would go on to lose absolutely everything I've ever had in my entire life in the probate case that followed. So, I mean, bro, losing a parent is brutal. And I empathize with anybody who loses a parent. But losing both parents, especially just 3 months apart, I was left with this overwhelming, palpable, tangible sense of being alone and being orphaned. I didn't have anybody in the entire world. I didn't have anybody to call when I found out my mom passed away. I had nobody to contact, to cry to. Zero. I had nothing. And that feeling was a physical pain. I remember the physical pain. My grief manifested into a physical pain, like I could feel it in my chest. The amount of times that I found myself buckled over on the floor, just bawling my eyes out in pain, like the wind was knocked out of me. You know that feeling? And if you've experienced this pain, I am so sorry, because it's as if something kicked me in the stomach. It's like life kicked me when I was already down. I consistently had that feeling of losing my breath, aching in my chest. I didn't even have time to process it. I was trying to process losing my father, and then I stopped using heroin, and then I lost my mom. So, and then quarantine hit. So literally, I was being knocked down, it seemed, in every freaking direction. I felt like I was drowning, quite literally. I couldn't breathe. And so many times, and this is how I know that I am here for a reason. This is how I know that I was put here in Mexico for a reason, because I didn't have access to any of the substances or any of the drugs that I wanted to do. I couldn't get heroin, just doesn't exist here. And I had in the past, when I was here in Mexico, caught a habit from buying Suboxone patches and methadone pills from the pharmacy. And after I lost my dad and then quarantine hit shortly thereafter, I literally had no money. I had zero money to buy anything. I couldn't buy anything from the pharmacy. I couldn't access the heroin. There was literally nothing I could get my hands on that I wanted to do. Because trust me, I would have, and I probably would have died. All I wanted to do was escape what I was feeling. I didn't want to be awake. I hated being awake. All I wanted to do was be numb. So, not having access and being so broke that I couldn't buy anything literally saved my life. Because at the time, I didn't care. I wanted to end it all. I wanted to die. I didn't have any hope for the future. I had zero hope for ever being able to crawl myself out of that hole. I didn't see it getting better at all. I kept questioning, why me? Why me? I had just lived through and survived somehow 17 years of heroin addiction and misery and burning everything to the ground, only to lose both of my parents within 3 months, literally within a month of stopping using. I was like, what did I do to deserve this? I was questioning, why me? But you know what's crazy is that my addiction taught me how to survive. My addiction gave me survival skills that I never, ever would have learned or been accustomed to otherwise. And now looking back, I realized that the grief taught me how to feel, because I had numbed myself for so long throughout my addiction. For everything, I got high over everything. But my grief taught me how to feel everything. Now, also, I want to say, I didn't really start truly grieving for a while after they both, like, I was in such shock. My nervous system, my whole body, my brain, my heart had literally been shocked. It took me a while for the reality to hit. I mean, honestly, I was in such shock, questioning, like, it felt so unreal. My whole life, I dissociated for like a good 6 months, 8 months, even a year, because I didn't want to accept it. I really didn't want to accept it. I thought, there's got to be something, like, this can't be real. I kept waiting to wake up. But when the sadness started to really hit, and I started realizing that my dad wasn't calling anymore on a daily basis, my mom wasn't messaging me on Christmas, my dad wasn't calling me and singing his stupid happy birthday song anymore. That's when it finally hit. When the day to day, everyday things stopped. And I realized that neither one of them were there. And I had to feel that. The grief forced me to feel feelings that I hadn't felt in a really, really long time. My grief forced me to face that guilt and that shame from my addiction, from the crappy things that I did. The anger. I was so fucking mad. Like, so angry at my parents. How could you leave me? I was angry at myself. Like, how could I do this? How could I do the things that I did and become the person that I became? I was angry at the universe. I was angry at God. I was angry at people for being assholes and not being there for me. I was angry at the entire fucking world. People talk about grief as if there's literal stages of grief. I don't even know. I probably should have looked it up before I did this video. But I'm pretty sure it's like, I know anger is one of them, sadness. I don't know. I don't know. But there are no 5 stages of grief. There is nothing linear about grieving a loss. You're all over the place. I was so all over the place, it was wild. I would journal a lot because writing is something that got me through because I had nobody to talk to. I had no support. Writing it down got me through so many, like the whole thing. I would write letters to my mom, letters to my dad. I would just literally write out everything that I was feeling, no matter what it was. Grief is so messy, and that's how it's different from addiction because addiction is kind of predictable, right? I mean, kind of a structure to it. There's a routine to it. Every single day, like my only goal, the only thing I had to do on a daily basis was cop what I needed for the day. Like that's it. And then everything's great in the world again once you're not sick anymore. But grief, there's no structure to it. There's no routine. You might wake up crying, you might wake up numb, you might wake up angry at the world and hating your life and wanting to die. Like literally there's no structure. It's so messy and it's so unpredictable. Because for me, the addiction in my life, it's like I was trying to die slowly. I was unaliving myself on a daily basis very slowly. I was actively participating in a very slow death, and I was okay with that. But the goal of grief is about learning to live when the people you love are gone. Because now I know, and I mean, I still grieve. Like literally, I think about my parents every single day still. And I don't know if that's ever going to change. I hope that it doesn't. I can still hear my dad's voice. Like my birthday's in a couple days, and he would call me every year and sing me this stupid happy birthday song. And I still hear it. I can still hear my mom's laugh. Like, and I'm so grateful. And today, now that I've like been through it and I have enlightened myself and awakened and was forced from the pain, like I am grateful for that pain. I mean, I say that I'm grateful that I lost my parents, but it's not the actual event of losing my parents that I'm grateful for. It's the pain that it caused. I'm grateful for that pain because that pain brought me to that moment where I finally woke up and realized that I could be feeling something else. There was a moment, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting in my bed, and I think I had just like had a breakdown over thinking of my mom for something, and I think I'd just written her a letter in my journal. And I was sitting in my bed and I was crying, and I had this awakening moment when I realized I was choosing to stay miserable. I didn't have a heroin habit to blame my misery on anymore. I hadn't been using heroin. I wasn't addicted physically to literally anything. So that excuse or that justification to being miserable, I didn't have that anymore. So in that moment, I realized that the way I was feeling and my life and the things and the misery that I was experiencing were all my fault. Like, and if I could choose to stay miserable, which I was doing, I could then choose to feel something else. And from that moment on, I continued and focused on feeling something else. I would journal a lot. I wrote a lot every single day what I wanted my life to look like because I needed to practice thinking positive thoughts about my future because I was so used to having no hope for the future and feeling trapped and feeling like I had no way out of my misery or my life or any of the bad things that were happening around me. Once I started writing down what I wanted, even if in the moment I didn't think any of it was possible, I still wrote it down, like what I wanted my life to look like in the future. And I wrote that shit down every single freaking day because I needed to give my brain the practice of thinking about other things. I needed to make those positive thoughts easily and more accessible because I was so sick and tired of thinking the same negative thoughts every single day. I slowly started to change my language and how I spoke. I started to stop complaining all the time, which is something I realized I did all the fucking time. I started practicing gratitude, even Even when I had absolutely nothing, there's always something to be fucking grateful for. So at the end of the day, I am grateful for that pain, because without it, I probably would have never became the person I am today. Unfortunately, I needed to hit that drastically low bottom in order to crawl my way up, in order to find myself. I needed to experience that loss in order to find myself. And sometimes I'm like, wow, I can't believe I was that far gone, that it took that much pain to finally choose myself and to actually heal myself. Like, years and years I spent being miserable and experiencing a million rock bottoms. Like, I had a new bottom every week. Every other Tuesday, I was picking up a new rock bottom, and I was okay with that, and I was fine. And I never once realized that I could feel any differently. And unfortunately for me, it took experiencing the worst pain anyone could freaking experience in order for me to heal. I had to lose everything and everyone in order to find myself. So take it from me that if I can turn it all around and if I can change my thinking and heal from something like that and come out on the other side and be grateful for it and build a connection with something greater than myself, the universe, and and trust and have faith and have hope and be excited for a future that I never even thought that I had. I mean, if I can do this shit, come on, bro. I know you can too. But anybody who's watching this, and if you're struggling, you're not, doesn't mean you're a weak person. Struggling doesn't make you a weak person, it makes you human. And if you get anything from this video, be it that there is always fucking hope. As long as you're still breathing, there is hope. Even if you don't think that there is and you don't see it getting any better, there's still always hope. So I think that's all I have to say for today. I love you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. You can lay down right here, Mela. Right here, Mela. Right. Oh. Oh, what the fuck? There's something flying in my apartment. I don't know where the hell it came from. Is that a sign? What is the spiritual meaning of a moth? Oh, Dad, is that you? This is me in my brain now. Like every animal that I come across, like yesterday, there was a pigeon that literally came up and like laid down next to me on the beach. Do pigeons do that? Like, he took a nap, like literally right next to me. I could have petted him. I was just talking to him. Like, I fucking, man, let me tell you, this whole healing thing, the connection that I've built with something greater than myself and just like the world as a whole is just wild. Past me never thought it was possible.